we're wearing glasses. It's not embarrassing. In fact, today it's a fashion accessory. People wear frames as a style statement. But hearing care hasn't gone through that transformation yet. There's social hesitation among wearing hearing aids. And if you look at glasses today, nobody hides them. People upgrade their frames every year. So why hasn't hearing care gone through that evolution?
Welcome back to Can You Hear Me? A podcast about hearing, hearing loss, and everything in between. I'm here today with Chintan Bhayani, founder and CEO of Synva Hearing in Hyderabad, India. Chintan, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you so much, Rishi. It's been great to have you here talking to me about this industry as such.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just jump straight into it. My first question for you is a simple one. Can you tell me more about Synva Hearing, its mission, and what you're doing right now to work towards it?
So at Synva, we are on a mission to make hearing care stigma-free. That's the simplest way to put it. If you look at the eye industry today, we're wearing glasses. It's no longer a weakness that people look at. It's not embarrassing majorly. In fact, today it's a fashion accessory. People wear frames as a style statement. Brands have built aspiration around it, if you can see. But hearing care hasn't gone through that transformation yet. Hearing aids are still seen by people who are old age majorly and people who are disabled. There's social hesitation among wearing hearing aids, and people look at hearing aids as something that is, seen to be hidden. And that's the gap we're trying to close. Now, we don't manufacture hearing aids. Neither do we innovate the device hardware itself today. But what we have innovated is the journey through which hearing aids are bought. Because stigma doesn't come from the product in itself. It comes from the experience around it. And if someone walks into a dark clinic, which is transactional, and it reinforces that stigma subconsciously, where there's a clinic and you see a poster behind the audiologist, which is the ear anatomy, the very classic example I give every time I go somewhere. If someone walks into a clinic like that, they feel that stigma subconsciously. So at Synva, we built an experience center instead of a clinic, a space where you feel like you have come to buy a tech product rather than a medical device, like you'd feel when you walk into an Apple store. And when someone goes through that kind of experience, something very subtle happens. They don't feel like a patient, they feel like a person making a decision to upgrade their lifestyle. And that mindset slowly moves away from shame, and that is how stigma slowly dissolves. Now, our tool here is the experience design, and that's what Synva is building. And to answer your second question, what are we doing right now? We're doing something very simple. Our mission is very deliberate. We focus on education first consultations, not product pushing. That's why we're building content on YouTube through our podcasts and majorly to simplify hearing care in India. Majorly, also what we're doing is collaborating with any doctors and specialists through my personal Get In Sync podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome, actually. And I really love how you're trying to address the stigma, because in my experience, I've seen that stigma is really one of the biggest things that is limiting people from receiving hearing care, hearing aids, and even cochlear implants. So all of this treatment is being blocked for the simple reason that people feel like they'll be judged if they have one. And even though there's been a lot of progress in the last couple of decades with reducing that stigma, it really is still a real thing that people see all the time. And I really love how you brought up this glasses example, because it's just another sense. And this glasses is just like a hearing aid. All it is helping you with that sense. So why hearing aids have stigma, glasses don't, is crazy to me, and it's crazy to you too, as it seems like, which is why you started Synva. So yes. I really like that, and honestly, I'm going to have to steal that metaphor to explain stigma in the future, because that's quite good.
Yeah.
Just curious, what inspired you to start Synva and do all of this stuff? Because really, it cannot be easy.
Yeah. So what inspired me to start Synva is something very personal. It's personal to you. You getting into the hearing care industry as such is very personal. Similarly, in 2019, around 6 years ago from now, my grandfather was diagnosed with a hearing loss. Now the doctor advised him to wear hearing aids. Now the interesting part here was the moment the audiologist explained him hearing aids are these things that you have to wear all the time. This is how they'll look like, his immediate reaction was, boss, I don't have any problem in hearing. I'm hearing fine. And I remember sitting over there and thinking, why did he react like that? I mean, we're not blind when we wear glasses, right? We just can't see, that's why we wear glasses. What's the problem in wearing hearing aids? That's when I realized it wasn't denial about hearing loss. It was denial about hearing aids and how they're represented in India. Even today, almost 99% of hearing aid centers in India operate like clinics. And subconsciously walking into clinic makes you feel like something is wrong with you. And we cannot deny this. Wearing hearing aids in India is still seen as something only old people wear. There is stigma. There is stigma in that part. And that moment made me realize something very important. The problem wasn't just the device. The problem was in the positioning of the device and the experience that you go through when you're purchasing this device. Again, I again bring the same metaphor because if you look at glasses today, nobody hides them. People upgrade their frames every year. They proudly wear them. So why hasn't hearing care gone through that evolution? Now, I come from a business family. So naturally, I've always been inclined towards solving gaps in the market. And I saw a very clear gap in India. Hearing aids were being shown as medical devices. But in reality, they are advanced tech products. But why are we still selling them as bandages? That didn't make sense to me. Now, the natural question people ask is, the natural question people ask to me is, how did you enter a field that's traditionally led by audiologists? I'm not an audiologist. First, I deeply respect the audiology profession in itself. The diagnosis and the clinical expertise are irreplaceable. That's no question asked about it. But my entry wasn't clinical, it was more experiential. Because I was into music for a very long time since my childhood. And that's why I've had natural relationship with sound. I understand frequencies, I understand clarity, tonal balance, etc. And being an electronics and communications engineer, understanding how hearing aids work, signal processing behind it, the circuitry, the communication protocols, that wasn't very difficult for me either. And that's why I entered asking, what if I redesigned this entire journey? And that question became Synva.
Wow, very nice, very nice. And, I'm sorry to hear about your grandfather, but really, I'm glad it was inspiring to you instead of, downgrading. And I'm glad at all the work you've done, hearing about it and seeing it online as well. So you've mentioned how these centers are experience focused and not product focused. So can you tell me more about why your centers are state of the art and, what this experience entails and how exactly patients are getting a different experience by going with you instead of somewhere where they're going to feel like a patient, really?
That's a very interesting question because I like to call our experience center as a state of the art center, and emphasis on the art because for us, it's not about the equipment, it's more about the design. And when we were designing Synva, I didn't want it to feel like a medical clinic. Again, I keep saying this a lot of times. I wanted to make it feel like somebody walking into an Apple store, which is minimal, premium, modern, majorly, which is inviting. Shouldn't feel like, walking into a medical clinic. Because environment influences psychology. This is something I knew for a very long time. If you walk into a dark clinical space, your mind shifts into something where you feel like something's wrong with me mode. But if you walk into a beautifully designed tech-forward experience center, your subconscious shifts into, I'm upgrading something. That's powerful. And functionally, we've built something very different as well. Now, this is just design, but functionally, we have an experience room where users can try multiple hearing aids while simulating real-life environments, different real-life environments. And instead of just sitting in a silent cabin where I'm asking them, can you hear me? And then they say, yes, I'm able to hear you. Instead of that, we simulate different conversation settings with different background noises. We simulate real world scenarios. So the person doesn't just hear, they experience the difference. That's why I say state of the art.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I can see why a patient would, or just a person would really find this kind of clinic more inviting and better for them to have a good experience with their hearing aid. So why do you think other places are so lacking? And I don't want to say behind, but it's almost as if we know that there's stigma. So why haven't more people been going after this? I just want to hear what your opinion is on this.
Again, this is a very interesting question which I have been asking to myself quite a lot of times, which makes you think what is difficult in doing this, right? Why is it difficult to build an experience center? It's not a big deal today because the major issue I see with what others when they look at hearing aid industry in itself is that people do not really understand what goes behind. What's the psychology behind the person, the user that's buying the hearing aid? I think there's the gap where if the top level management sees that and they actually implement that into their infrastructure, that is when the major shift in the mindset will come, where they will not just be building clinics, they'll be building experience centers. And one more major thing is that the amount of space that traditionally a hearing aid clinic requires is just one room. It just requires a 10 by 10 feet room. But we here have a 2000 square feet experience center. And that is like 20 times more than just a small room. And that is one of the major things that people have a inside the box mentality, where somebody who's in the profession, they'll not be able to think of this particular aspect from somebody who an outsider can think, right? That is the major thing that I see is the problem, or I think can be the problem, where people are not seeing it this way. But although there's one more thing I want to add here is that outside in the West, in Europe, in Australia, there are many experience centers that I actually took inspiration from. So the gap is in India. I'm talking about India here. Outside, it's already happening. In India, there was this gap. And I thought I'll be the first one. Let me be the first one to actually solve this issue here.
Yeah, and that's a really good explanation you have given me to compare these clinics, these existing clinics in India with what you are trying to do. And really, it's awesome that you're doing this work to bridge the gap between these Western countries like, Australia, and I assume the US too, and India. So really, it's great you're bringing this high quality hearing care to India. So we've talked about the past, what inspired you. We've talked about the present, what you're doing right now, but I really want to ask about your future. So where do you see Synva's future plans? Where do you see Synva going?
So the big picture vision is very clear. In the long term, we see Synva having multiple experience centers across major cities in India. But again, these are not just copies of what exists today. More advanced it'll be more functional, it'll be more standardized in a way. For example, one major gap in India right now is real ear measurements. They're not standardized today. REMs are something which are commonly implemented across most centers outside India. And I've heard a lot of audiologists, experienced audiologists who are from the West and from Europe as well, that talk about REMs as a standard practice and as a a reference system to verify if the hearing aid is working correctly, if it's fitted correctly. So I would like to bring that into the hearing aid industry altogether in India as a standard practice at our stores. Because if you're building a brand that stands for precision and trust, measurement must be a part of that process at a very micro level as well. Again, that was the entire macro vision where we want to go to multiple cities in India. And now how do we achieve it? That's where the strategy comes in. It will require very strong systems, strong team culture, great team of audiologists, structured operations, and very an in-depth marketing strategy as well. We're doubling down on content today, where education is our first priority. Brand positioning comes later. Simultaneously, doctor collaborations or major digital presence over here. Because if you want to remove stigma at scale, you cannot just open stores. You have to shape perception. So the future of Synva is not just expansion; it's actually perspective transformation, I can say.
Wow, yeah, great answer. And, I'm glad to see how ambitious you are with Synva, and I wish you all the best with that. So
Thank you so
just
much.
before we end the podcast today, do you have any last remarks?
Uh, there's nothing actually that I want to say. I think I told a lot of things with you, but it's been great talking to you, Rishi, and sharing what Synva is here to build and what we're looking forward in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I've loved hearing about Synva. This has been very interesting. And I love learning about all things in this field about hearing loss. So it's really great to see how all across the world people are trying to revolutionize hearing and hearing loss research and hearing care itself in many different ways. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Rishi. It's been great.